Hi, Save Jerseyans. This is Matt Rooney, your blogger-in-chief. I'm coming to you not from where I'm usually recording my interviews, back up in the heart of the machine in Camden County. I'm actually down in the Boardwalk Empire today. Good old Atlantic City. Got to go over to Tony Baloney's, and I got my spicy sausage sandwich with ricotta cheese. So
that's good.
As far as calories go, I'm set for the entire weekend at this point. But delicious as always. It's great to be here. And it's even better when we get to meet with a friend who's working on some important issues, so we can talk to him, see where the state of affairs are down here in Atlantic County and in Trenton, get some good perspective, and look ahead, because we're all focused on the midterm elections right now, obviously, with the federal races, Senate, the House. But our site's name is Save Jersey, and we have legislative elections coming up next year, and this gentleman sitting to my left is going to be a key figure that you're going to be watching in the cycle ahead. Assemblyman Chris Brown, thanks so much for talking to Save Jersey.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be here. We're heading into a legislative election cycle next year. There's a lot of Save Jersey readers who are not from the southern part of the state. Let them know what you're about.
Sure.
So to start with, husband, father,
Sure.
legislator, lawyer, soldier.
Yes.
So maybe you can tell us a little
All the
about
above.
where you're coming from and then how you got involved in politics.
Okay, fair enough. In high school, I met my wife, and after 15 years of dating, and when I got back from the first Persian Gulf War, I was married. I've been blessed. We've been married now for 22 years. We have 3 wonderful children. My oldest son is 18, Matt. He's a freshman in Atlantic Community College. My middle son, Danny, he's 16, and my daughter, Mallory, is 14, and they both go to Atlantic High. Very blessed, very fortunate, wonderful kids, and a good wife and a good family. I'm very fortunate that way.
So you juggle a very busy career and 2 teenagers.
Yeah, three teenagers.
3 teenagers,
now.
excuse me.
Yeah, they
Right,
keep me
yeah.
straight. When I get home, they let me know that I really don't know anything, that
Tougher
I'm
than
off
any
base.
constituent.
Oh my God, I'm cleaning up after the dog in the front of the house. So it's a great home life. I really am very blessed and very fortunate. I went to college here in the great state of New Jersey at Rutgers. From Rutgers, went on to Widener University School of Law. While I was at Rutgers, I took ROTC, and so when I graduated, I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Army. I went on to go on to Fort Benning and went through infantry school, went through airborne school, spent some time in the service, and then went off to law school. In my 3rd year of law school, I got a letter in the mail that I was being activated to go to the Persian Gulf. And
Saddam was acting up for the first time.
That was the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
And when I was activated, I had already paid for the semester. I had gone to class for at least three months worth of schooling, and they told me that I could have avoided the obligation based upon the fact that I was in school.
Full-time student.
Full-time student, but it was not something that was even an option to me. These are other soldiers and citizen soldiers who I was friends with, I knew, I trained with for years, and it really wasn't an option.
The idea of them going overseas and putting themselves in harm's way and you staying behind, you just couldn't.
No.
Wasn't happening.
That wasn't happening.
You train with these people, you formed bonds with them.
Right, and you have an obligation. In other words, this country, I mean, I grew up in a house with my father. My mom left when I was young, so my dad raised me from the time I was 12. And we thought we were middle class, or I thought I was middle class, but I don't even know if we were actually middle class as I was growing up.
Right.
When I was in high school, I joked because a lot of teachers didn't even think I was going to get out of high school. So to have been able to join the Army, become a lieutenant in the United States Army, graduate from college, I realized very early on how blessed we are to live in this country with the opportunities that are there. And it's just a matter of applying yourself and working hard. So with that, there was no way that I wouldn't serve and go. So I did. I served. When I got back, I did a clerkship for a judge here in Atlantic County. And then I started practicing in a firm, and 20 some odd years later, I have my own business. I understand the pressures of payroll. I understand the pressures of the taxes and the burden that it places upon a small business, particularly during the recession time. When you look at your employees and you know they need their health care and they need to be looked out for, and you have the demands of the free market and trying to earn a living. It's very difficult, but it's very rewarding, and I've been very fortunate here with our business as well. We're doing fine.
Yeah, and you've managed to build a life for yourself and also cultivate a successful business at a time when, unfortunately, Atlantic City has not been doing too well.
That's true. Times are a little rough right now.
Right. I know this morning I came down here. I got down here, I guess, about 8:30 this morning, and I walked into the court and I saw a newspaper out in the lobby. I guess Carl Icahn, the billionaire who is involved in the casino industry, among other industries, has said that the Trump Taj Mahal is almost certain to close, in his opinion. And he's going to have a lot to say about it because he's a major investor. It seems like almost every week now we're getting negative headlines about Atlantic City and its future. I know at our website we write a lot about the positives, but sometimes it's easier to focus on the negatives.
Well, I normally say, and one of the reasons I appreciate your blog is that it is even-handed and is as interested in good stories as it is in bad. So often the mainstream day-to-day media, they only go to the airport if a plane crashes.
That's right.
And so a lot of them land successfully, and I wouldn't be reporting on that once in a while would be nice.
You're right. It's very true. I think sometimes the media, just in general, they decide what their story is and they work backwards.
Right,
which
right.
They're supposed to be journalists. I'm a commentator, and I often say that to people. They say, "Oh, well, do you consider yourself a reporter?" And I said, "Well, no, not really. But if we happen to do it better than they do, a lot of the times, it's just because we're honest and we work hard.
Yeah.
It's by accident. It says more about what they're not doing." And one of the things I think it's interesting about what's been going on in Atlantic City, from the looking at it from the perspective of state politics, even though you've just gotten elected to your second term,
that's right,
in the assembly, you've emerged as one of the most vocal defenders of the casino industry workers in this part of the world. And there's a lot of them. I don't think people outside of South Jersey, outside of the Southern Shore, if you want to call it that, appreciate what a large part of the economy it is. And something that shocked me is the extent to which South Jersey legislators, most of whom have a D after their name, not an R after their name, are almost excited about North Jersey casinos now. What do you think's driving this push for North Jersey casinos, and why all these South Jersey legislators suddenly seem so supportive of it? It's counterintuitive.
Well, one of the things I really try to be careful is I don't want to speak for other people, and so I honestly cannot answer why any South Jersey elected official would support, or not just support, but wouldn't go as far as to fight a potential referendum. Clearly, we have thousands of jobs that depend upon it. Our economy is still based upon it. And one of the things that I've been trying to advocate and trying to get across is, we're not saying, or I'm not saying, that we can never have gaming outside of Atlantic City within our state. What we're saying is that just a few short years ago, Mr. Hansen did a report, and they evaluated this position. And what they found is that with Atlantic City being a $2.5 billion industry, there's a lot of good going on here, and that we need to diversify Atlantic City so that it becomes a resort that has gaming as opposed to strictly gaming. And when we diversify to the point where our non-gaming revenue is 50% or greater, then we could start talking about a North Jersey casino or wherever anybody has an interest, because at that point Atlantic County and the state would be more bulletproof. You look at Las Vegas, they're very smart. They spent over 10 years diversifying, and right now in Las Vegas, their non-gaming revenue is 65%. So with all the convenience gaming popping up around the country, they're still in the driver's seat because they know that they're gaining their revenue from non-gaming sources. And that's what we have to do here. And if we do that, and if they give Atlantic City the time to do that, then we will be fine. On the other hand, one of the things that concerns me as business people, as people who are entrusted to make sure they run the government right, why would you even consider putting a casino anywhere outside of Atlantic City before you have a business plan, a business model? these are the people that we're going to get, this is the money that we're going to raise, and this is the effect it's going to have on Atlantic City. Right now, the only surveys or studies that have been done indicate that 42% of the people from the state of New Jersey who gamble in Atlantic City come from North Jersey because it's just so densely populated. So if you build a casino in North Jersey, you're obviously cannibalizing those who come to Atlantic City. To do that now, when we're transitioning into this destination resort, makes no sense. Atlantic City has provided for the state for over 30 years, and when times were good, the money was pulled out and spent throughout the state. Now the times are turning, which is natural. The convenience gaming that has popped up in Maryland, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, of course our gaming revenue is down. Of course there's a contraction in our gaming market. But what people aren't hearing enough about is how our non-gaming revenue has increased. What they're not hearing about is how we've had over $350 million of private sector investment pour into Atlantic City, even during these times. From Bass Pro Outlet, Margaritaville, there's a conference center, we just did the topping off ceremony, all non-gaming amenities that will increase the tourists and increase our non-gaming revenue. We're at $2.5 billion. We have about $750 million in non-gaming revenue for over a $3 billion industry. Right. At $3 billion, we support approximately 30,000 jobs. So the analysts seem to say our gaming is probably going to drop down to about $2 billion, maybe 1.8. So what we need to focus on is increasing the 750 million so that it's at 1 billion, 1.2 billion. We maintain a $3 billion industry, maintain the 30,000 jobs, and grow from there before you open gaming that's going to devastate this region. You know, we had over 26 million visitors. We were, Atlantic City was voted the best boardwalk and beach throughout the country. There are so many positive indicators that are going on, but everyone's focusing on the gaming, which I understand is a gaming city. Yeah. But of course our gaming revenue is down. So is Pennsylvania's is down. Delaware's is down. The last report on New York is down. And what is interesting, even in Delaware, the state has now started providing subsidies to the racinos. So this notion, too, when we talk about a business plan, well, we're going to open a casino in North Jersey. It's an oversaturated market by all accounts.
You're not expanding the pie. It's just more people eating from the same pie.
And that pie happens to be Atlantic City from North Jersey. Now, yes, of course, we are going to recapture some of the people in New Jersey who leave to go to Pennsylvania or the other locations. Yes, you're going to recapture them, but not enough to compensate for the amount of money you're going to lose and the devastation you're going to do to an area that's already working well. So I just wish there'd be a little more thought, and with so many middle-class families depending on the casino industry, it's just too important to just be rushing ahead for whatever reason.
No, I mean, those are all excellent points, and you know, you're a fiscally conservative guy, I'm a fiscally conservative guy. You know, I always, when it comes to the government's involvement in any type of enterprise, right, I always err on the side of the free market.
Right.
At the same time, even though I personally have been critical of, for example, aspects of the Revel deal that the state structured,
sure,
I don't think a lot of people, especially outside of Atlantic City, appreciate how much of Atlantic City revenue goes towards projects in the rest of the state. If you go to the website, entire list of projects, most of which are nowhere near Atlantic City.
Well, what's happened is, and you raise a great point, when the Casino Control Act was written, the thrust and the reason that casinos were allowed to operate in the state of New Jersey was to revitalize Atlantic City. At first, the referendum tried to pass it statewide, and everybody said, we don't want it in our backyard.
Right.
So then they came back a couple of years later, and they said, oh, if Atlantic City wants it, yeah, let them deal with it. So the Casino Control Act said, look, we're going to give incentives. We're going to give the lowest tax rate for a casino. And here's
Right.
what we want in return. We want you to create economic development, and we want you to create jobs and job opportunities. And what has happened over the years is we've gotten away from the economic development for Atlantic City. In other words, as the money came in, the others in the state, and that's why a lot of times us here down in South Jersey, we complain that things aren't done fairly. The money that was supposed to go to Atlantic City to revitalize Atlantic City was pulled out and spent throughout the state. In fact, finally, under the leadership of Governor Christie and the bipartisan work with Senator Sweeney, the legislature, bipartisan manner, agreed that the $30 million that Atlantic City had been spending up towards North Jersey, they could keep, and they could use it for marketing and advertising. So you say, okay, after 30 years, Atlantic City finally got a marketing budget. Well, how do we compare that? How do other successful businesses do it? Well, Las Vegas spends $120 million a year.
Right.
To give you an example. So people say, look, Atlantic City is not doing well. Well, we've been fighting tooth and nail to hang in there because the revenues that we're supposed to stay here having, and with all the gaming coming up around us, now our market's contracting. And what's the answer that they're telling us? Well, just build one up north.
Right.
Yeah, they go, oh, really? Thank you. So you can see how it's counterintuitive and counterproductive. And my only point is, let's just look at it before we rush ahead. Let's just look at it. Is this really in the best interest of the state? Can building a casino in an oversaturated market really help us, or will it just help the interest of a few?
But again, go back to what we started talking about when we launched into the Atlantic City discussion, Assemblyman. You've very much been a voice in the wilderness as of late in South Jersey. I've noticed either active support. Steve Sweeney has been completely acquiescent to whatever it seems North Jersey is interested in doing. I have to say the same for Jim Whalen, who is the state senator down here in the 2nd District. And then you have Jeff Van Drew and Vince Mazzio. Vince Mazzio is your district mate here in the 2nd District. He's from former mayor of Northfield. And they've been going back and forth between quiet and, again, acquiescence to this North Jersey plan. And I loved what you said the other day. And, I didn't interpret it as mean. I interpret it as a statement of just fact and truth that, hey, listen, if you're not going to represent and advocate for these thousands of workers who elected you, resign. Quit your job, because that's what you're here to do at the end of the day. Again, what I liked about that comment more than anything else, it also brought more attention to this issue. People that aren't even anywhere close to Atlantic City in terms of geography are now paying attention to the debate, and they appreciate, well, even though I don't live close, they see, maybe it affects me. Maybe it's something that as a New Jersey resident is important to my future too.
It is important. It's important to every resident of the state of New Jersey because every county does business with the casino industry. Yeah. Every county to some degree or another. And so everyone should be saying, well, look, before we go ahead and do this, we should study it and make sure that we're getting it right. When you talk about a voice in the wilderness and what I said, this is something that I'm very passionate about, obviously. It not only affects all our local families, our local economy, but I do believe that it impacts the state as a whole. And so if you're elected by people to do everything you can to make sure that the very basics, that they're able to get a job, they can raise their family, they can go to the doctor if they need to go to the doctor, and they hope to retire someday. And most of all, they hope that their children are provide a better opportunity, can do better than they do. Right. And our role, I believe, is to, with government, limited as it can be, but where you can have that impact and you can make a difference, that you need to speak out and do it. And so that was not intended to be a ridicule. It was simply to be a statement that I think all elected officials, myself included, and it goes like this. If you're unwilling to stand up and fight for the best interests of the people that elected you, then you should resign. and that applies across the board to all of us,
regardless of what the issue may be.
regardless of what the issue is.
And I'll be honest with you, I mean, again, this is me talking, and everybody watching this knows that, you know, I am what I am. I make no apologies for what I say, but, you know, to me, it just comes down to, you know what, be a man, be a woman, stand up for your people. You know, sometimes as an elected official, you're asked a very obscure question on the campaign trail about an issue that you may have not had enough time to pay enough attention to. Like, oh, you know, what do you think about the North Atlantic mushroom assemblyman and its plight? This is an issue that someone like Vince Mazzeo, as mayor of Northfield, has had ample time to consider. So, in my humble opinion, to not have a strong opinion one way or the other, regardless of what it is, even I can't conceive of what it would be, but if you could somehow argue that North Jersey casinos are better for Atlantic County, make that argument. Don't say nothing.
I can share with you what is frustrating. Down here, the Mayor's Association for Atlantic County passed a resolution. Democrat, Republican, Independent. This issue is so important, it certainly transcends party lines.
Sure.
And the resolution called upon the state legislators to fight for the freeholder board here in Atlantic County, which again is Democrat, Republican. It transcends party lines. If ever there was an issue, it seems to me that we could put any party nonsense aside and say, look, we got to work together on this. It would be to protect these jobs and protect the families. Yeah. And we received a resolution from the freeholder board, unanimous, Democrat and Republican alike. So this issue is not about winning political points. It's not about trying to bump ahead. It's about, look, let's get together. And one of the things that I did in the spirit of bipartisan cooperation, I called and I met with my counterpart, and I haven't gotten any help on it. And it was a frustration over initially feeling as though, okay, we're going to be able to work together, and then later find out that no, not only have you not done anything, you're not going to do anything.
So I wanted to tell everybody I'm going to be bipartisan, but when push comes to shove, when rubber hits the road,
there was nothing. And then you're also trying to have it both ways. And yeah, well, I don't like a referendum, but basically accusing me of grandstanding on the issue. And to me, I proposed solutions. There are 3 bills that I put out there. There's a resolution that I put out there. And so if you want to criticize those bills and or the resolution, that's fine. But what I've learned, it's only been 2.5 years of being involved in elected office. When you're dealing with some people, instead of focusing on the issue and attacking the policy, when they have no plan, when they've offered no alternative, when they're saying things that just don't make any sense, what they do, they attack you. Yeah. And so I'm not going to allow myself to fall into that trap or game. This is too important. And so I just focus on the issues, and I say to them, their answer is, well, we want a seat at the table when it passes. And so it seems to me that if you know it's a bad law and you know it's not going to help anybody that you represent, why would you want a seat at the table to talk about a bad law? Wouldn't you want to prevent it? Wouldn't you want to advocate? In other words, use your life experience, your knowledge, your ability to go to your fellow legislators and say, look, I don't think this makes sense, and here's why. But to just do nothing and then say, I'm doing nothing because I want to seat at the table for a bad law. Isn't it your job, regardless, to advocate against a bad law?
I mentioned that you're an attorney. I'm a lawyer. That's kind of like
Everybody just tuned out.
Everybody just tuned out. Stop throwing things at the screen.
That's right.
It's expensive equipment. That kind of like us sitting down with our client saying, okay, we're going to go to court, throw some stuff up against the wall, and we'll talk about it when it's over. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well,
it's just absurd.
You always have to be worried when your lawyer looks at your case and he says, "Listen, we're about to go into trial." He says, "We're going to get them on the appeal." Like, well, I thought we were fighting the fight now. I mean, why would I acquiesce now and worry about a second round? Right. Let's get in there and win now, or let's try as hard as we can. There was a second time I was activated for war. It was about four 4 years ago. I'd been out of the Army for about 10 years. I was on an inactive reserve list. And I came home one night and I got the mail, and there was a packet from the Army. I thought it was my discharge papers, so it sat there for a couple of days.
Right.
And finally I opened it up. My wife and my kids were sitting down to start eating. And I looked at it and it said, "You were called to active duty for 418 days. So the only other time I saw that was the time I was activated,
Right.
10 years ago. So I said, I put it back in the thing, and I went and I ate dinner. And
Right.
I went back and I looked at it later, and it took me a few hours to really process what's happening.
Let it sink in, yeah.
And then, of course, I had to tell my wife, and she explained to me that you're not going, and this isn't happening.
It's
and
not an easy
we lived through it
conversation, I
once.
can imagine.
But long story short, eventually my wife knows me, and the family understood. And to kiss your children and your wife and tell them you're leaving and you're going away, and to leave your business. And I was a judge in Galway Township. I had to leave the judgeship. I left my business, but most importantly, I left my 3 children. I was still coaching Little League at that time.
You're completely uprooted.
But my country and my obligation to my fellow Americans was just too important to me. There were so many other husbands, fathers, mothers, sisters, daughters who have done 2, 3, 4 tours. And if you don't stand up when you're called upon to stand up, who will? And so I put myself often in when I'm looking at this, and I know there's some powerful people who would like me to be quiet and go away, but they don't have a rifle in their hand, and we're not in an active combat environment. So I don't really worry about it. Whatever they're going to do to me, they're going to do to me. But you have to do what is right when you know it's right.
I don't think half those sissies in Trent would know what to do if they saw me with a rifle in their hand. They'd be in their Mercedes headed north on the Parkway. You know, you speak so passionately about Atlantic City. I know we could talk about this topic forever because, as we joked about off camera, you know, we're both, South Jersey history nerds. We're passionate about this area. There's a lot going on in Trenton that doesn't involve Atlantic City directly. And you being a second-term assemblyman, you've already positioned yourself as an outspoken conservative on many of the issues that are facing the state, including all the spending and taxing and borrowing, which continues. And it doesn't seem to abate. I mean, I think under the Christie administration, we've definitely slowed a lot of the bleeding. Certainly with the property tax cap, for instance, I think that was helpful. But we still have a long way to go. So besides being that advocate for Atlantic City and for Atlantic County that we know you are, what are some of your other priorities in Trenton that not just currently, but also into an election year, actually you want to talk to the voters of your district about?
Well, I think one of the major issues with our property taxes, and part of the reason that we continually wind up asking property owners to pay twice, is a school funding formula. And so people understand a little better. 33 of our districts out of over 600 receive 60% of the funding. So when they do that, you have areas like Asbury Park. It's a wonderful place, but they receive approximately $33,000 per year per pupil. And so you would think, okay, it costs $24,000 a year to go to Rutgers. They're receiving $33,000 a year per pupil. They must be doing tremendous, and they must have a high graduation rate. And so if my point is this, as consumers, we have definitely learned that just spending more money is not the answer. And as consumers, if we truly care about the children, the kids, the whole reason we're doing this, then we need to look more closely at how we're spending the taxpayers' dollars on education. And I would argue to you for a place like Atlantic City is not one of the 33. So right off the bat, a resident of a town, whether it's here, whether it's up in Trenton, whether it's the Oranges, wherever it may be, you pay your property taxes for your local school. But then you're also paying the property taxes at a disproportionate rate for 60% for the 40% for the other schools, so you get hit twice. And so revamping the school funding formula, I think, has to be a priority. And I believe we can do that in a manner that the focus is on kids and the focus is on figuring out how to more wisely spend our money. There's another area that one of the things that you look at, and I don't always, no, I just don't agree with the demonization of anybody and trying to win your argument by tearing down somebody. And there's certain things that at this point we can agree upon. I've met with the leaders of the fire unions as well as the police unions, for example. And the retirement buyouts with the unpaid sick leave and the vacation days where you have somebody join the department in 1983 as a patrolman, retires in 2014, and cashes in, was never sick for the past 20 some odd years, and gets paid at that rate. We have over, I believe it's anywhere from $500 to $800 million in obligations. We pay around $50 million a year. The unions understand that. They understand that, look, this system isn't exactly working properly. They know that it's harder for them to get younger officers, younger firemen onto police departments because the municipalities can't afford it. Right here in Atlantic City, they had a bond in order to pay about 5 to 7 retiring people. So why
I think a
not
lot of
stop
people
it?
appreciate how much of a municipal budget, not even a big city like Atlantic City, is driven by those types of legacy costs.
Legacy cost, and that is so true. And so this is something where you can work together with a union who understands and appreciates, okay, we need to do this. And if we would have done it 3 years ago, because that would be 150 million at a minimum we've already saved. Yes, it's a portion of it, but it's one example of spending that we all agree is a problem. And yet I don't understand why, if the union heads I've spoken with, unless I misheard them or misunderstood them, understand that this is an area that can be reformed. And those are just a couple examples of issues that I'm passionate about. Let's accomplish what we can accomplish. Let's work together on what we agree upon. We have enough to bicker about, but when your state is borrowing too much money and spending money it doesn't have, and we still have serious issues with our infrastructure when it comes to our roads and our highways, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And while everything I do believe should be on the table in terms of how we're going to fund it, it's only fair to say our friends across the aisle, and cuts have to be on the table too.
Well,
We
when
have to
you're spending
reduce.
$2 million for every mile, I think that's what the exact figure is in the recent report. It's amazing. It's 12 times what they pay nationally. If you look at all the states and average them. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think that compromise is a part of the legislative
Sure.
process, even though I think taxes often have the exact inverse effect that they're trying to achieve. But in this circumstance, when you're paying that much more than the rest of the states in the union, there's got to be a problem. You're right. The other side has to begin to say, listen, there's some places where we can act to lower the cost before we think about taxing people more,
Right.
especially at the holidays.
Right.
I have to fill my tank to drive down here to shop at the wonderful Atlantic City outlets, and I love it, but,
It's
you know.
right. It's right. It's tough.
I'm preaching to the choir, but no,
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a good point. So, I mean, do you think on that particular issue we may have any success finding a middle ground?
I certainly hope so. I'm not on that committee, but I certainly hope so. I hope everybody rises to the occasion and understands that we are slowly but surely reaching critical mass. And it has to be an understanding that it can't just be one party. It does not include the other party and just jams what they want to do down their throat and then grandstands. I think there has to be a fair analysis by everyone.
Right.
And that's what people put us there to do ultimately. They put us there to work together. They understand we might have ideology differences, but in the end, they need us to function. I mean, think about it. I know myself. For my life, I just got up, I raised my family, I went to work, and then I got up and I did the same thing day after day after day. And you do it with, in the back of your mind, the hope that the people you've elected are spending your money wisely, are investing your money wisely, are paying down their costs, they're not over borrowing, and are setting it up so that all the work you're putting in for your family and your family's future and your community are being guarded. And so we owe it to them.
Yeah.
We owe it to them to just do some of the very basic things, and let's be honest, and let's do a fair evaluation of what's going on. Work together.
It seems to me, though, that so much of it's communication. Because we talk about ideology, and one of the things that I've admired about your early career here in the legislature, and I want to stress early because you're not one of these guys who's been at this for decades. You don't say one thing in the district and then a different thing when you get to Trenton.
No.
You are what you are.
Right.
It is what it is. So it's not as if you're saying conservative things here, liberal things there, or vice versa. You just are what you are. To me, the difference, and it's something that I think at times Governor Christie's done quite well, it's not so much what you believe, it's your willingness to communicate it in a way that is approachable. Sometimes it's tough. You're not always telling people what they want to hear. Oftentimes you're telling them hard truths, but you go and you have that conversation. And not just with base Republicans. You're willing to go have that conversation at Union Hall, where maybe there hasn't been a Republican setting foot there in years.
One of the things that I've learned is you don't want to spend all your time in an echo chamber where everybody's saying back what you already think. I learn more from sitting with somebody who's ideologically opposed to me. I may not agree with what they're saying, and I'm sorry to say most of the time I don't, but you have to listen. And but I do. They educate me. In other words, it fine tunes the point on why they believe it. And the other thing that we always have to have is a respect for other people and the right of other people to have other opinions. And just this notion that just because I have this opinion makes me right. One of the things that I know more than ever, and I told you before, my children remind me of it. I don't know. There's so much for me to learn. And so I gain a great pleasure out of going to the union halls. I've been a lifetime member of the NAACP, very much believe in the organization, enjoy participating and helping. At the same time, member of the Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation and the VFW and the AMVETS.
Did you hear Governor Christie's recent speech up to the NAACP in North Jersey?
No, I didn't.
If you got a chance to see that, I'll have to send that to you. And it raised a lot of eyebrows. And again, to me, some of the leadership I definitely disagree with their approach. But if somebody invites you to speak,
you
go and be heard.
Of course, and don't they deserve the respect? I mean, look, I don't agree with the theory and the philosophy to simplify it that, look, we can fix this problem if only we raise the tax and spend the money.
Right.
I just don't agree with that philosophy.
But that's the dominant philosophy in Trenton.
Unfortunately.
Like with education spending, if we spend $25,000 on a child in Camden that's going to school there, even though we haven't fixed any of the other structural problems in that child's life, he still has drug dealers on the corner, he's in a classroom where he can't learn because of disruptions, a lack of discipline, somehow it's going to get better. And it never does. And you're right, I get frustrated because I don't understand how anybody can believe that.
And that's the front. But what we have to ultimately realize is that they do.
Right.
And that we have to respect the fact that they do, and then we have to intellectually try to debate and point out to them through debate, not necessarily argument, but through debate over why one is better than the other. I totally believe that the more opportunity, not dependency, but opportunity. And I am an example. As I said, I came from a single family home. I thought I was middle class, but I'm really sure I wasn't.
You weren't born on a country club.
Not even close to it. And in fact, when I got back from the first Gulf War, and I was clerking for a judge, my high school invited me back to talk to the seniors. And what I said to them was basically this: look to your left, look to your right. You are all Americans. It doesn't matter where your origin may be. In order to be Italian, you have to be born in Italy. But to be an American, you can be born anywhere. There's nothing that's stopping you from doing anything you want to do as long as you're willing to work hard for it. And I said, when I sat in your seat, nobody even thought I was going to get out of here, and now I have. So the funny part actually is, as I'm leaving, Ms. Peterson, who was my math teacher, as I'm leaving, she goes, Chris. I said, yes. She goes, you're right. I didn't think you were going to get out of here. And so now they're inviting me back to talk to the class, and that's America. And so as long as the opportunity is there for people, anyone, now let's be honest, there are people of color who face greater obstacles, and at times it is more difficult. There are things within our society that we have to constantly strive to get better at. But when you have a child who at night is in a setting where nobody's necessarily helping them with their homework, they don't know where their meal is going to be, to me, we need to make sure that every child understands that they are valuable, that they are loved, that they are important, that they are special, because if that child can feel it and understand it, then we can move to teach them other things. But if you have all pegs don't fit in all holes, and we have to be aware of the differences. When my kids got into 6th, 7th grade, and some of the math that they were doing, I couldn't even help them. And I can only imagine a child who goes home and 1st through 5th grade didn't have really any help, any support system. And so while we're aware of that, these are some of the things that we need to look within our society and hold a mirror up to us and say, what can we do to do this better? Because simply spending more money is not working.
Assemblyman Chris Brown fighting for Atlantic City and Atlantic County. This difficult time at its juncture, but hopefully it's just a juncture.
Yes,
not
it
an
will
end.
pass.
It's all things cycle if the right people are going to work hard. Also fighting the good fight for all of us in New Jersey and Trenton, trying to bring a little bit of sanity to that often insane city.
Yes, that's very true.
What other way can you put it, right? It was great to talk to you, and I hope that going forward, we're at the end of 2014 now, but as we move past this election in 2015, you'll stay in touch with us.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you, and thank you for everything you do, and everyone who watches. Thank you for watching Matt.
Hey, I appreciate it. They don't really have much of a choice at this point. It's like watching a car wreck. They're like, let's see what he said today. Assemblyman,
Thank
it was
you
fantastic.
so much. Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I thank you again.